Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.
All right, good evening, everyone. Hello, and welcome to this season of Tome Traveler. This episode, I'm joined by a raiding party I'll happily pillage any village with. So let's have everyone introduce themselves, what you've been involved in, and what cantrip you wish you could cast in real life. And so I'm going to start us off in the order of what I have, and I'm going to toss it directly to Sean.
Ooh, first up. Hi, my name is Sean. You probably recognize me as a regular on several different shows here at Rick and Rasp, even before Rick and Rasp. Mini painter, things like that. Cantrip that I wish I could have. I think I'm going to go really time saver and wish I had prestidigitation and I could just clean things up in like instantly.
You got
Damn
the
it,
good
Sean,
one right there.
You stole mine.
Well, see, the reason I was thinking about that is I've got a dog that's absolutely terrified to take a bath, and I could just prestidigitation him.
That works. Absolutely. Well, since you piped in, Michael, and that was the one you were thinking about too, I'm actually going to toss it to Corey. So, Corey, what about for you?
So, I am Corey. You have seen me here on Rick and Rest before. You can also find me Monday nights at Midnight Alley on YouTube. My go-to cantrip that I wish I had in real life is just plain and simple message. Like just being able to ping somebody across the room like, hey, get me out of here. It's so useful.
I actually think that's a really good one. I've been trying to come up with one. I'm still because prestidigitation got taken. But we are now going to go with Shireen.
Hello, I'm Shreen. I'm occasionally on the internet, but mostly not. And I've done some writing for Nerdburger Games, and I will be running games there at Gen Con this year. I mean, the thing about prestidigitation is that it does so many things. It's not just cleaning, right? Mm-hmm. But I think other than that, mending.
Yeah.
Because I sew, and so that would make a lot of things very handy. And also I can be a little bit clumsy sometimes. So, just being able to put things back together. No, I broke it. No, I didn't. I think that's pretty useful.
That's a good one. No, definitely. That's a really good one. And Michael, I'll actually let you go before me. Let's see if you can knock me out of the running on the one I want to do.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, Michael, you can find me here on Rook and Rasp in a number of different shows and productions I do through the Seriously Let's Plays. Currently doing the Star Wars show Smuggler's Blues on alternate Tuesday evenings. Please come by and check out our ragtag crew and that show. You can also catch me on the show Tubular Teens with Titans. It's a podcast. It is Power Rangers inspired. And we are in late to middle of season 2. It's a lot of fun. I play the team mentor. You get to chew a lot of scenery. It's great. And then you can also, I'm all over the place. I mean, really, I am. You can find me at Gen Con this year working at the Kobold Press community room. I'll be in there helping seat people and helping people get to their games and making sure that everybody has what they need at the table. Kind of like a little valet, if you will. That'll be fun.
Nice.
It's a good time.
I'm really happy to hear that you're going to be back there.
Oh yeah, this will be the third year that they've had me come out and help. Love to do it. It's a lot of fun. It's a good group of people to get to play with and meet. And looking forward to spending 5 or 6 days in Indianapolis with like 70,000 people. It'll be fun. 80,000 probably this year. Who knows?
I'll have to swing by and say hi.
Yes, please do. I know that I believe our illustrious leader is looking to make another pizza party happen this year.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, we will all have to get together and consume mass quantities of sauce and dough. Sauce and dough.
Definitely.
So cantrip for me. Here's the cantrip, John. I hope this doesn't muck up your works. I'm gonna go with guidance.
Ooh.
Especially in the
Yeah,
last 6 to 8 months, I feel like there's a number of times I would have really liked to be able to ask the ether to provide me with an answer. Over on Rook and Rasp, we do Metaphysical Mudroom, and there are tarot card readings, typically weekly, done by different members of the group. And those have become invaluable to me in the last 6 to 8 months of my life. And I guess it's kind of like having my own little guidance once a week on Sundays. But yeah, I think guidance would be the one, since the other ones have been taken, Sean. It'll be guidance for me.
Nice. Well, if you don't know me already, my name is John. I'm part of the leadership here at Rook and Rasp, and I wrote my own RPG called Gutterpunk, and I've now written for Third Eye Games PIP system, as well as for Wedding Games on their Never Going Home most recent Kickstarter. But for me, if I were to pick a cantrip, I actually think it would be open close, because I have locked my keys in the car many a time. I have oftentimes, I oftentimes just need to get in the house, and our house has a padlock, and I forget the code. But wouldn't it be great just to screw with people and randomly open the doors and freak them out?
It would work
I
on
can-
me.
I was
I
just thinking
can,
about stubborn jars.
I can
Oh,
think of some
yeah,
other
yeah.
really fun uses for that. We can talk about those off stream.
See,
You-
for
well,
me, I use a mobility scooter, and not everywhere has the buttons, right? So I
Ooh,
could
yeah.
just walk up and be like,
Yeah, 100%.
"It'd be
Yeah.
great."
Very practical.
Awesome. Well,
I think
today,
that's gotta be a new one. I'm not familiar with that cantrip.
yeah, I think it was.
Pathfinder.
Oh, well, either way, I'm using it.
Yeah, it still counts. It's still a D20 system.
It is, And hey, nice segue. Today we're visiting an often maligned dice that games use. It is the D20. Now, it is, I would say, kind of a elephant in the room. It's also something that right now in the tabletop community, there seems to be this huge divide of people who hate D&D and people who love D&D and people who are like, and there's, who here has heard of beggar talk or beggar? Who here has heard of that?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. So the overall idea, this concept, which I think came about 2 years ago, was a group of creators who basically started up saying, "We're begging you to play anything but D&D." And I mean, that's where and so you go on TikTok and put in beggar talk, and you're going to find people specifically talking about anything but D&D. But this is where things get interesting. I want to say most of us don't hate D&D as a game, but we'd love to see people expand their repertoire of tabletop RPG games. When I first started playing games, D&D shared shelf space with ninjas and super spies, BattleTech, and more, and it wasn't such a lopsided space. So I'd love to get other people's perspectives on that.
I think in some cases the lack of brick and mortar does change that, because I remember our local gaming shops, would occasionally put a display. Maybe they got in a new indie game and they put out a display, or they would group a lot of similar games together. So all the sort of sci-fi stuff was on this set of shelves. And so, or the fantasy stuff was on this set of shelves. And sure, it was mostly full of D&D, but there was other stuff and it was right there in your face. And there was never, in my community anyway, there was never a a time that I recall that everyone was like, no, you have to be playing only this game, or you can't play this game, or,
Yeah.
it was just sort of like, this is the most popular one right now, but if somebody said, hey, could we play this weekend? Sure. It wasn't. So I find this attitude kind of odd.
Ex-
It's not something I've personally experienced.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, you can look behind me and see my thoughts on games. I love it. I want people to enjoy and embrace more of them. Uh,
John, we all know that that's just a background.
you know,
It's very well animated, but it's just a background.
Yeah, yeah.
I was on with Matthew Orr on his interview show, and he's just like, I don't think he'd ever seen the studio space since we decided to make the library the background. But
It is terrifying, the content, because I remember the old house where it had a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit upstairs, just kind of spread out everywhere, and now it's just like scary large.
I
Yeah, ours is scattered, and I'm scared. Like, if we actually can all get it in one space, I think it's gonna be. I have like most of the Changeling books, which is a lot.
what?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's amazing, actually.
But
that's Sean. Yeah.
yeah, no, I was gonna say, back to, yeah, a lot of it is kind of like, D&D is almost like capitalism in the gaming universe right now. It's like, it is the powerhouse. It's got the most money. It's going to entice you to come play it because it wants to keep making the money. And so, the game designers are like, we are begging you not to play is just their way of, giving a finger to capitalism, trying to cut that pie down smaller.
Yeah. And unfortunately for the beggars here, it's kind of a threefold problem, honestly, getting people to play anything other than D&D. Pathfinder is the biggest competitor to D&D as a direct one-to-one.
Yep.
But Pathfinder also doesn't have the sheer amount of media representation, not just in terms of podcasts like the ones I participate in, but also bigger Let's Plays like um, Legend of Vox Machina being Critical Role being the biggest one, but also the McElroy brothers having done several shows in the 5th edition setting or system. The D&D movie that actually is one of the best game adaptation movies I've ever seen. Yeah, it's almost as good as Clue is in terms of game adaptation and the feel of the game.
I don't know. I thought Battleship was a really good adaptation.
What?
I haven't seen that one yet.
To build, also to
I just
build on
wanted
what
to show
Corey's.
I just
Sorry,
wanted
go
to
ahead,
show you
Shereen.
before I have to put them back.
Yeah, so many books.
So pretty.
Oh, the art.
I
The
love
art.
Changeling System.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hand those off to your lovely assistant. That's nice. I was going to build on what Corey said, and again, I don't know that it's necessarily the capitalism part, but it is just a simple fact of representation, right? Like how much
Saturation.
of the media that we consume over the last even 15 to 20 years references in some way, and whether it's either an episode of a comedy that we enjoy or a drama or what have you, references D&D specifically as a brand, as a thing. Like even like think of the show Stranger Things obviously is a big one that would pop out right now.
Yeah.
Like the entire premise of that show is built on Dungeons and Dragons. It's not built on any other role-playing game system. They don't talk about any other role-playing game system. All the enemies are from Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's literally just built on that.
And I think
And that comes
kind of-
from a generation that grew up with it, though. Like those creators all grew up with D&D as being the game they were playing.
It's kind of like
Sure.
Phoenix.
But I think in another way that ties in, because the market is primarily online, we've lost many of these sort of third spaces, community spaces, where we don't really have forums very much. anymore. If you go on Reddit, they're all very, dedicated to specifics, and it's really hard to get into sort of generals. It's really hard to find a place like the old gaming store where you would go to the fantasy section and there was D&D and then some other games. They were there. They weren't at eye level with the signs pointing at them. And so we also have to really look at marketing being heavily a very big issue. Hasbro pays for media to call Dungeons and Dragons by name. Hasbro has the money to pay media to call Dungeons and Dragons TM by name. Like, my buddy Craig does not have the kind of money to get on Young Sheldon or whatever they're watching, or whatever's on these days, and promote Capers TM, right? You can't. That's money. That costs a lot, and heavy marketing, and so much of that being shoved in your faces. And then when you hear about Cory Doctorow and his talks about really educational talks about how algorithms work and how it is all pay to play. The more you pay, the more that ad gets seen. And so everywhere you go, it's D&D, D&D, D&D shoved in your face. And it's always done by that company on that company's site or on a third-party site that they've heavily paid to override any other person who might have cobbled together enough money for a Facebook ad or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So even if you go and look and you do a search for fantasy role-playing games, Hasbro has paid for the top 10, top 20 spots on Google to come up as Dungeons and Dragons TM.
Oh yeah. There and there's definitely a smart point in all that, and smart and frustrating. That is, during third edition, literally, they put out a brand, and it was a brand that I blame personally for the way that it's gone, because D20 compatible, the famous D20 SRD and OGL, and all of a sudden everything was associated with Dungeons and Dragons. And how many games remade themselves in D&D? And so it's smart marketing, but it drives me nuts because it's like, we use the D20. We are D20. You are the D20 engine. It's like, we are the Actual Play company. What's the name of your company? Actual Play. Everybody goes and searches for it. It's what comes up. Or we are Dice Company. You search for Dice Company online, and all of a sudden they come up. And so there's that intelligence to that marketing, but it still drives me nuts.
Yeah, and it is very limiting.
It's limiting. It's also kind of a self-feeding cycle too, because the more organic reach something has, beyond what they're paying for, you've also got so many of these people pushing D&D as their system that they're using, because they're feeding into, hey, this is a popular thing. Here's our actual play of it. We are not sponsored or affiliated with D&D in any way, shape, or form, but we're using it because this is what's popular, and this is what's going to attract the most attention.
But I also think we're hitting the self-eating cycle that is D&D. I think we're hitting a mass overload, and it's going to start, the groups like us are going to start navigating to other systems, and that will percolate up because, we're not, I'm not going to change anybody's mind on what's cool, but, if someone's asking me to run a game, I'm like, yeah, I'll run this, and this. I don't want to run D&D. I've played it to death. I'm not really happy with where it's at, but if you guys are cool trying something else, I'll be happy to run it for you. And I think that's going to start, and especially with, all the angst right now with the new, Dungeons and Dragons 5.5, and, it's decisive.
Hasbro and WotC have also made a number of missteps in the last 6 months to a year,
Yeah.
year and a half, I should say.
Nice content, we'll take it.
Yeah, well, and the licensing issues again with the OGL stuff that happened early in 23.
Yep.
Like, there have been a number of missteps that have pushed people to look into other things, right? And pushed other game designers and other game publishers to try and take their own tack on, let's make our own license that we can allow people to use. I mean, if I was a content creator like with a license that had a monetary value, a real monetary value, I mean, I would be silly not to consider using a D20 license to create this game for this product to get it on shelves as quickly as possible and get it into people's hands.
And to get your name
Whether
out there.
whether that is the perfect system for my game or not, or for my license, that's a creative decision that people have to make at their own level. But I mean, you can't deny the sheer amount and the ease in which you could get your license into people's hands by using a system that's so commonly referenced and known.
Yep.
Yep, absolutely. But today we all play it. I
Focusing,
play D&D, but the D20 is more than D&D. And in fact, I wanted to do this show because I think that the D20, the dice itself, may be the gateway to get people into other games initially. There are so many wonderful games out there, but how many do you know of, or in general, the population out there, how many do you know of that aren't D&D? Now, with that said, though, one of the things I love about Tome Travelers is that we research and we kind of take you back in time. We do a little time
Wait.
travel, little Doctor Who.
We were supposed to look stuff up, right? There was homework.
Well,
For
if you didn't, I have enough knowledge. I
Your-
would be able to cover it.
Your dogs ate my homework, John.
That I can see happening.
Or that 10 minutes before the show started, me frantically flipping through an old Palladium book, going, I cannot remember any of this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
There's also, a second screen, like right up to my side.
well, so let's talk about it. Let's go into the history, and let's talk about where did the D20 come from. Now, I will toss out there. We actually have, although not a numeric dice, the polyhedron that is the D20. We have found sources of it and creations of it that date all the way back to ancient Egypt. The shape itself has been around for more than just centuries. But when it entered into being used in gaming, so it entered into modern use in 1970, and it was first printed and created in Japan for gaming. That's the first numeric dice used in this method, and then by the Bristol War Game Society in the UK. It has since then been adapted into tabletop RPG games and did not originate with D&D. It came out of wargaming. And so I have a few fun and important historical things that happened in the year 1970 that I want to get everybody's reactions to. If you're ready. How about the Apollo 13 famous mission was in 1970?
Yeah. Yep.
The Concorde jet made its first flight.
I remember that being a big deal when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had always dreamt that I would get to ride on a Concorde when I was younger. I'm kind of sad
yeah.
it doesn't exist anymore. Well, it does. There's some company bringing it back for novelty flights, but
I don't remember why they stopped.
Huh?
Honestly, I don't even remember why they stopped. I mean, they were
cost.
Cost.
yeah.
Well, there was
figured that's what it
also
was.
some environmental damage and
Yeah,
a lot of
because their engines were
bothering
very.
people because when they broke the sound barrier, it's awfully loud.
You don't
I
say.
remember the Concorde being ubiquitous enough to just be like a throwaway line reference in the remake of Parent Trap. Concorde gets you here in half the time when they reunite in England after most of the movie.
I don't even remember that part, but thank you. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I remember it always being like it was the quick travel trope in like TV and stuff. They could just take the Concorde, like it wasn't hideously expensive at the time.
Yeah.
Like there was just a reference I was watching. I had it on the background noise, The Nanny, where they hopped on the Concorde to get to England real quick. I'm like, yeah, that's what rich people do.
Yeah. Well, speaking about environmental, how about President Nixon signed into law the Public Cigarette Smoking Act and OSHA in 1970?
The OSHA thing is cool, but I am young enough that I might need a refresher course on the Cigarette Act.
Oh, okay. There's been a lot of different cigarette acts that have
Mhm.
come in the last, from that, from about 1970 to 1980. But this one specifically talked about creating spaces where there wasn't supposed to be smoking.
Okay.
I want to no, that wasn't it because I was gonna say I thought Nixon's Cigarette Act was responsible for limiting or stopping smoking on flights, but that's not true because the first time I flew was in like '83, and yeah, they had a smoking section, but I don't, you're in an encased tube
Yeah.
that just gets everywhere.
The curtains don't really help.
No,
No.
no.
Well,
Okay, so
yeah, we have over 100,000 people protested the Vietnam War in Washington, D.C. Now, this was one of the largest protests that happened. That was a war protest. There were earlier ones. We talk.
Mhm.
I'm gonna bring up a topic that we talked about a little bit. We were talking about generations and everything else, and we give a lot of crap to the older generation, and rightly so. But they also they protested for 7 years straight against wars. We can't even protest racism for 2 years in a row. Sorry, that's my opinion. Anyway, I had to get that out there. I
I get it. I
apologize.
get it.
oh yeah, no.
No, I was raised by hippies, and like my mom was a union rep, and she helped get like same sex couples some rights at her job, and get them
Nice.
like marriage
Thank you to her.
before it was legal, like same sex marriage was legal here. She helped them get like benefits and that sort of thing. So, not all boomers are the worst, but
Yeah. Well, that's always been that's always been my thing. Is they're not the worst. That's a whole nother discussion. Anyway, how about this one? Now, this isn't one of my secret ones that I held back. If you're ready, now
Okay.
in 1970, the Methodist Church was one of the first Christian churches to allow women to become full ministers. Now, this was 2 years before women were given equal rights in college education by the United States government. So I would like to toss that one out there because, yeah,
wow.
Wow, the Methodist Church was a progressive.
yeah,
Which is hilariously relevant given what's going on in the Methodist Church right now.
yeah,
Oh, well,
exactly.
that's interesting because I grew up going to United Church, and I don't know if they were the first, but I know that they have had women as ministers for a long time, and then they would perform same-sex unions as well for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize they weren't the first to have women. But yeah, it's pretty sad. My mom said even just a couple years before I was born in '77, and she had my parents both had good union jobs, but my mom made a bit more money than my dad because she had a college degree. And she went to get like a washing machine or something. And to get a credit card, she needed my dad's signature. She
Yeah.
had a college diploma and a union job that they trusted her with that, but apparently her silly woman brain just couldn't handle a credit card all to herself without her husband looking over her shoulder.
Well, you know how women are with shopping.
Uh,
I mean, come on. No.
you know,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Yeah,
No,
I grew up making that noise at my television so often.
uh,
With the Jetsons and the Flintstones. Like if you'd be like, oh ha ha, the lamp is a pterodactyl or whatever, and then he'd be like blah 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 women, and you'd just be like, oh. And yeah.
yeah. I I I'll share a story with you because I have a similar story with my mom from that era as well. Uh, but moving on within this, so in 1970, tons happened in the music scene, and I hid a few of these from y'all as well. So this was the year that Jimi Hendrix died. This was the year that Janis Joplin died. This was the year that Joni Mitchell retired. This was the year of Simon and Garfunkel's last album released together. And then outside of all this, because I mean the music is dying. The Beatles broke up, the Supremes broke up, and the Monkees broke up this year.
That one hurt.
Love the Monkees.
Well, I mean, do you say the music is dying, or do you say that 1970 was the year of the solo project?
Probably the year of the solo project, but when you think of all these groups and just the impact, just going from Beatles to Jimi Hendrix, the overall impact that it both had and still have,
Yeah.
All right, and I've got one last one for you to end on a bright note. And that is, this is the year that Walt Disney's Aristocats is released in theater.
I love that one. It was so cute.
I love the Aristocats.
It's a good film.
Second or third favorite Disney animated film of that era.
Oh
the
yeah,
Whole era.
And the little piano playing scene. It's so cute.
So cute. Has its problems, but oh my god, that story. Can we just give props to Thomas O'Malley for actually being a good example of non-toxic masculinity? Like, legit,
It was so
I know
rare
this
at
is
the time.
it's so rare,
Yeah.
but also, like, I know this is a bit of a derailment, but
Derail away.
Yeah.
I just have to throw it out there that he found a very attractive woman, both being cats, doesn't matter, and only blinked for a second when he realized that she was a single mother with 3 kids in tow. And he got over it really fast and said, hey, I'm going to get you and your kids home. No big deal. And proceeded to do just that and protected the kids along the way. Like, my heart, Thomas O'Malley is, like, if he could do it, be Thomas O'Malley, people. Just
Yeah.
be Thomas O'Malley.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. hmm It was Prince Charming in Sleeping Beauty. I mean, the thing that got me about Sleeping Beauty was that the evil queen in that one was the only one of any Disney movie that I've ever been aware of, except for in Hunchback of Notre Dame, that they mention specifically, religion. But she serves Satan specifically, mentions
Ooh.
by name that she serves Satan. And so Prince Charming barely knows this, Aurora, but he thinks she's really cool, and he kind of sees the situation she's in, and he's like, this is not right. This is, I mean, it's cool that you've got fairies for parents, but you're not really supposed to be in this situation. You're very isolated. You kind of need to talk to other human beings, maybe? And
Yeah.
and then she gets taken away, and then he goes and fights a minion of literal Satan for her. And I'm like, and even not just for her, though, like, just because it needs doing. And she, he saves her in the process, but it needs doing. He's got to do this. It's his job. I liked that.
Man.
It didn't strike me as a gendered issue. It's,
Oh, yeah.
to me, it portrayed him in a very knightly way without ever making him a knight.
Good point. Yeah.
I don't
And
hear
I think-
anybody here singing the praises of Gaston, so I think we're good.
But there's a whole song
Well,
about what a guy he
no
is.
No one can play like Gaston.
But I think a lot of those concepts are really solidified and amplified in a lot of these old games, where you had these like very specific tropes and they were expected to look and be a very specific way, and they were so stereotypical. And, I think until I really started listening to conversations about diversity and the need for representation, and I mean, obviously, as a girl, I noticed in all the shows growing up how there was either not a girl or one girl whose function was girl and be girl. And that was it. And, they were always just shallow and stupid. And, you couldn't identify with them. And you were like, that's not even a person. That's a collection of, like, hate. It's stupid. And, and then when you get to the D&D table, it was very much a lot of that. As a girl, there was a lot of like, well, you can't do that, and you're not supposed to be like that. And I'm like, this is the one place where I am allowed to be the barbarian and the fighter and the ninja or whatever, like,
or multi-class and be all three.
Exactly.
I like that.
Exactly.
And it was so frustrating when I would encounter, these people who were like, no, we must maintain these stereotypes and sexism in the game. And, back in those days when I couldn't just hop on a computer and look it up, I would have guys keep the books away from me so that I couldn't read them.
Yeah,
So that they could
early
be the boss.
gatekeeping. Yeah.
So they would literally take the book out of my hands. But often that was the only people I had to game with. So it was either I put up with that or I didn't game. And yeah, that really sucked. I mean, I did find better people to game with. They were out there. It takes some time, and like obviously it's the same thing now. That hasn't changed. You hop online and you try and find a group, and sometimes
one of the benefits of the modern age is that it's a lot easier in most cases to find a group and be like, you know what, these aren't my people, and then find another group.
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah.
Like I regularly game with people who live in like Europe, in like the Netherlands and stuff, and it's so cool. It's so cool that I get to do that. That I get to meet all these people, and I get all these like different cultural perspectives from people, all over the place, even just Americans. I mean, I'm Canadian. We don't live in the same country, there are differences, and so it's fun to like see how that influences how people game and like influences their stereotypes, and it's always going to be an influence of like how like their culture's historical kind of what's the word, like myths and monsters, and how that affects, and like, and there was in at the time in the old games, there's so much like cultural appropriation and stuff where they would just take the name and like the most basic like one sentence concept of what some mythical monster was and write it out and just make stuff up. And
or cultural references, right? Like they would actively use parts of other cultures in a very stereotypical and in most cases derogatory way. And, at the time they may have been thinking, oh, well, this, I'm going to include a samurai because samurai are cool, but then absolutely butcher the entire purpose or cultural reasons that samurai existed, because in the purpose of their game, it didn't matter. You got to be a Southeast Asian or Asian character with a sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your two classes were samurai or ninja, and one of them was always evil.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a major issue that you have to be prepared for if you're going to look into old games. And there's a lot of that. And it's not just, we've been watching a lot of classic Doctor Who, and I mean classic Doctor Who, that is basically where a lot of the tropes come from, because they did it on that show. And there's a lot of that sort of bioessentialism of like, this group are evil. They're just evil. This race of people are evil.
Yeah.
And you know, looking back on it, I mean, when you're a kid, you're like, things are simple in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Things are good and bad, and it's not complicated.
Yeah,
But as you get older, you realize, oh wait, no, actually, there are shades of gray, and you know, a person can be both a victim and a perpetrator, and you know, it can get all fuzzy, and people can change, and you know, and you're like, oh no, it's not that easy, and then you know, you start, and then especially with the internet, and we get to look at everybody globally, and you get to see how other people are in their countries, and you're like, oh, people are people, you know,
Yeah.
all the same. And
We could. I mean, we
D&D's
can. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, I was gonna say D&D is really kind of, you can look at that because early D&D orcs are evil, inherently evil. Orcs should be murdered on sight. They are never going to be peaceful, and that's one of the changes I've liked, especially with 5e. All of a sudden, you have half orcs and orcs that are actually good, and it's fun to play those characters.
It's also increasingly the dismissal of the 9 hard lines of the alignment chart, because that doesn't exist in real life to begin
Mhm.
with. Like,
Yeah.
I've always
Exactly.
hated that alignment system, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, even when I was playing in like the early days of 2014, early 5th edition. But I've also loved seeing them, like, across the board, not just in D&D, but like across all of the systems that I've encountered, slow off the some of the more harmful stereotypes, because a lot of these fantasy races were based on actual real world cultures. They're very real world coded in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And if you're not looking for it, you're not really going to notice it. But if you pay attention, like the Tolkien's views on orcs and half on orcs came from his experiences in the war. I know that somebody just mentioned Tolkien in the comments. There's an entire essay series I can dig up again about Tolkien and his specific works, but also the kind of savage barbarian, I hate using that word, for the D&D specific orcs and half orcs, that whole culture that kind of is a blend of, at least from what I've seen, like the nomadic tribes and First Nations, and even some of the enforced immigration of some of America's earliest years from cultures like I can't think of any of the ones on the western coast of Africa, but the slavery era too.
Yeah. And honestly, we could do a whole show about, we really could do a whole show about all the things that need to be changed or are being changed, and I'd be happy to do it.
But like, what I'm happy to know is that I've learned these things because, of course, I didn't learn them reading the book where, you know, I didn't learn that Golem comes from one very specific Jewish tale about a very specific, a golem was like this specific character in a tale. It's not like a generic word for construct or something, which is how it was always used in D&D, and is still often very, you know, used in D&D. But I didn't learn that from these books. I learned that from other people, and I'm so grateful that, you know, that they were talking about these things, and I'm grateful that future editions will be better.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
But I do think some of those things are they taint, and I think a lot of people, when they're like, yeah, you know, they try and make it easy, and they're just saying, well, oh, D20 systems are bad, because they look at these old D&D books and they look at this bioessentialism and this thinly veiled racism and all the sexism, and you know, and then they go, well, you know, obviously this is a problem with D20 systems, and you're like, no, it's the wrong conclusion to come to. It's not the dice's fault that people wrote it this way.
Oh, 100%.
And so, if we're looking at games that, you know, just pulling us back in. So, but moving into the games that do are currently out there have the D20, and I want to say that I want to do an episode where we talk about some of the changes D&D and Pathfinder are making. I think it would be a good show by itself. But for the games that use the D20 that are not D&D, and that's I really want to get us to that. And that is, before we go too far, I do want to definitely toss out there a quick salute to the D20 SRD properties that really were kind of cool, like Farscape, Spycraft, Star Wars D20 was freaking awesome. Mutants and Masterminds, which is still going from Green Ronin. So we're not going to talk about them on this show, but needless to say, these games also fill this niche. From the halls of half-price books to the bargain shelves of Gen Con, may your pages never lose their luster, and may your spines never lose your stitching. But how about some recommendations or some topics of some games that also use the D20? Do I have anybody who wants to toss one out there?
Well, I have played Pathfinder. And it is a lot, it's crunchier than I like. I am not a rules-heavy person. I'm a very improv, role-play leaning kind of person. However, a buddy of mine ran the game, and he was very good about, getting us, what he encouraged with us was to use the numbers to build the type of character you want. So it was a really interesting way of really being able to tweak your character. Specifically, I was playing a gunslinger, so I made myself into the super sniper and that sort of thing. And so even as someone who doesn't like a lot of crunch, I was able to get into it. Because of that, because it's more just instead of looking at the numbers and going too many, how can I make these numbers work for me in a way that will facilitate what I want to do. And it's very satisfying when it works. It's definitely very satisfying when it works, but it can be kind of frustrating too.
Yeah. I grabbed the D20 Pathfinder book for the second edition, I think, and now they've moved into the ORC, which is their attempt to completely separate themselves from Dungeons and Dragons. And I bought the set because I'm going to support a union gig. Pathfinder and Paizo. Paizo is a union shop with their writers and their content creators. So I was like, heck yeah, even though I might not play it for a while, I definitely backed them and grabbed a set of them. So, but it does use a very character creation is very different. The layout's different. Everything feels different, but it still has that roll your D20. 10 is kind of the median of what you're trying to go for. If you roll a 10 or higher, you're going to probably succeed. Does anybody, anyone else got some input on it, or has anybody else really followed the whole ORC, what their changes are? Corey,
I've been trying to follow it religiously because my wife and I are writing our own D20 based setting, and right now we're currently playing through 5th edition, but we also want to be able to control a lot more of our setting, and honestly being able to support something that is union that feels a lot more comfortable. It's also a lot less fraught with legalese if you're actually reading the ORC versus the current incarnation of the SRD, which has been changed. There's a lot more, hey, your intellectual property is still your intellectual property. You are just using bits of our intellectual property to support it. You are still skinning it. We don't own that. We just own the internal mechanics. It's like somebody putting wrap on top of a pre-built chassis, essentially.
Yeah. And I think that the most recent ORC did go through the legal means of becoming one of the official like Creative Commons licenses now as well.
Yeah.
So that is freaking amazing.
It's using Creative Commons 5.0, whatever the current incarnation of Creative Commons is.
Yeah.
So, but the one where the particular Creative Commons where you don't have to share your specifics as part of that license, kind of thing. Because the Creative Commons license has gone through several changes itself over the years.
Mm-hmm. And so I think Pathfinder in that way, it follows a lot of the same tropes initially. Does a lot of things that are good, but I think it's a good, if not D&D, or if you're looking for something that is not, you're trying to branch out into something that feels similar, I think that Pathfinder is a great way to go. Now, how about another property? Does anybody want to toss out one, or would y'all like me to do one?
I've got one we can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean.
So it is going to be Renegade System.
Nice.
And right now, if you've ever wanted to pit My Little Ponies versus G.I. Joe versus Transformers versus Power Rangers,
That's
this
awesome.
is probably the system for you. Much like the old Palladium games back in the day, all the rules are similar. You can integrate really easily. It is, I would call this D20 adjacent though, because
Really?
while the D20 is one of your main rollers, everything is based off of skill checks, including fighting. So you're rolling a D20, but kind of like Savage Lands, where you put points into your certain skills. So, excuse me. If you're going to, let's say you put a lot into sniping, and that's a finesse skill, then you roll the D20 plus, say, a D12. You roll those together, add it together, and that's your metric for success or not.
I like that
So-
system.
Yeah, it doesn't just, it's really nice. It doesn't really it's not just the D20. And as far as the Transformers perspective goes, I only have this one, so I wasn't able to look up at the G.I. Joe or anything like that. You, like D&D, you have your roll, and then you've got all of your proficiencies and other things that you can put into the roll to move it up and down, or to move it up, essentially. Very rarely does you get penalties to roll downward. Like, you may be at disadvantage, but you still add in all of your same monsters. With this, there's a ability to increase your range. Like, let's say you only had a D6 in punching. Depending on all of your perks and other environmental things, that could move your range up and down for a given roll. So you could end up rolling a D12 because, let's say, you've got a lot of strength, so that increases your range, things like that. And then if you specialize, you actually get to roll all the dice underneath that and add that to your D20 roll. So yeah, it's got a lot of flexibility and really kind of amazing things like that.
Awesome. And yeah,
That
that's
sounds really fun, actually. I like
That
that.
does sound.
And it's built for cinematics. I mean, it's Transformers, of course. You've got to have it. The one thing I don't like is damage is 1 point at a time. It doesn't matter. And that bugs me because, like, if Megatron lands a hit on you, it does 1 point of damage.
Yeah.
yeah, but that's that I mean, that is the cinematic style. Is that it's a glancing blow. It's not a direct hit. Always.
True,
So it's always that last point.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense from the the old cartoons and comics perspective, where of course no one ever really got hurt, right?
Right. Of course.
Occasionally
No
in
permanent.
Transformers, you might have someone die,
But it was never permanent.
No,
it's
and
never really permanent.
well, and in comics too, it's the same. They only ever die if it is convenient to the current plot,
Yes.
and they never stay dead because that's never convenient to the current plot.
I mean, in the Transformers comics alone, I know a lot of bots died in the smelting pit.
Oh, Unicron? Yeah.
Man.
Well, not just Unicron, Cybertron's smelting pits. We
Oh,
won't
yeah.
get into that. That's a whole other thing.
But
That's another
usually,
episode.
yeah, but usually then that's never like a main character. It's always
Yeah,
like
no.
background characters.
Yeah,
background characters
definitely.
are allowed to die. Main
Oh, yeah.
characters never do.
The other thing I would say that is lacking from this game that I really in D&D, and it kind of comes back to that damage, like you're only doing 1 point of damage at a time. It is such a great feeling in D&D to land a critical. If you put your divine smite into it, and all of a sudden you're swinging for 50 points of damage. I mean, that's epic. It makes you feel strong. So for players that aren't used to kind of playing in the cinematic mode, it could be a little.
Yeah, it can be a little rough.
I think what you'll find is most of these systems also try to offset those large damage numbers by modifying how many hit points or how much life
Oh,
your systems and enemies have, right? Because
yeah.
when you drop from having a 100 point enemy down to an enemy that a big enemy might have 25 hit points and 1 point of damage at a time, if you start doing if you're doing 3 points, all of a sudden, wow, you're really swinging hard on this thing. There's it's all relative, right?
Yeah, it feels
Doubly.
big.
But large numbers appeal to that. That ooh, I got double digits. Ooh,
Yeah. Like Megatron has 25 health. Shockwave has 21. So yeah, I mean, it is a smaller range. Yes.
Yep. Which actually, that game system is a great segue to another one, just because of the way you described it, and that is the Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics systems.
Yep.
Now, yeah, if you've never
tunnel.
played them, huh? What's up, bud?
The tunnel, the funnel. Here's 4 characters. One of them might survive.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a part of the gaming scene that is the way it is. It's not a scene I play in commonly, but there are a lot that do it. But Dungeon Crawl has a D20 for most resolutions, but it does also use really strange dice in a dice change resolution, where depending on factors, you can raise that dice or lower that dice to sizes that you've never even imagined, like a D22 or a D18 or a D13, and so on and so forth. You augment that dice up and down, but it's a classic fantasy. I would liken it more to AD&D and First Edition because it does kind of pigeonhole you sometimes. Although it also has a little bit of Warhammer Fantasy, if you've ever played that really old version where you're playing careers. Like you are a baker that decided to go into a cavern. Yay for you. Or or you are a mage, which I have played a mage in Dungeon Crawl Classics, and it was one of the most fun things I've ever done.
God, that one looked nuts. Didn't we cover Dungeon Crawl Classics in one of our charity live streams?
Yeah.
I was in that game.
Yeah, Shalel ran that game, and absolutely
was
phenomenal GM. I was hoping that he might be able to get on for this show, but he works. Yeah, he works in Japan, and so having him on the show ever so often is kind of a real treat. But so that's Dungeon Crawl Classics. Does somebody want to toss out another one in this kind of the D20 vein?
Yeah. One I haven't quite gotten the chance to play with, but I did get my hands on their system resource document is Cypher System. That's another good D20 based system. There are a couple of other games within that. I think Numenera is one of those, and it's just the Cypher that's
the one I've played.
Yeah, Cypher is a setting or a system on its own. Numenera is one of the settings within Cypher. It's a really interesting system, and before the Wizards of the Coast SRD fiasco, it also had one of the best SRD documents that I've seen, because their entire game is part of that SRD for the system.
Yeah.
It's a 200, 300 page document. That's the mechanics, not just their license language. So I can't wait to get more of my hands on that one outside of Numenera. Like,
Yeah.
I picked up Numenera at one point to try and play it back before the world went into like chaos and isolation. Um, Back when I was much healthier. Uh, but it's also one of those that I am really, really hoping comes forward
Oh
once
yeah.
Wizards of the Coast kind of finally hits that oversaturation point and starts precipitating downwards again.
Yep.
So I'm
And
excited for that one.
yeah, chat's mentioning the it's Old Gods of Appalachia. That
Oh yeah, I've heard good
podcast.
things about that.
Yeah. So
I did
God, I
play
love that.
Numenera. I really, really enjoyed it. I remember really enjoying the system, having a lot of fun with that.
Mhm.
Uh, Gods of Appalachia sounds super interesting too.
it
Got
is.
I got to play Old Gods of Appalachia, and it was a lot of fun. I got to do it as a one shot for another show, another channel, and it was
It
it was a
was
great time. It
Yeah.
was we really leaned into the Ozarks of it, um, and it
If
was a good time.
I will just toss this out there, if you can find the podcast Old Gods, it will blow your mind. It will make you messed up. Serious content warnings. If you can't handle horror, don't don't go find it. But it is beautiful as a story. Uh, but other game, I know that for Cypher System, there's also Predation and there's also The Strange. So there are.
Mhm.
It is one of those things where it is a system that has attracted some, good properties to it. And Monty Cook is the bomb. I'm sorry. Monty Cook is freaking awesome.
Mhm.
They put on an amazing show every Gamehole Con. The second
Nice.
floor is pretty much theirs. And it's a great place to just chill out. They've had like drinks and everything else up there, and it's a good time. So absolutely love the company. Absolutely love the people that they've had working for them. So another good company to support. Uh, but anyone else want to toss out yet another one?
I've got a handful here I can touch on briefly.
Absolutely.
I will ping each of them. So I got really into Dragonbane, which for those folks who are unfamiliar, it is the recent, within the last year or two, reboot of an old Scandinavian system that was released in the 80s. And it very much, the tagline for the system is like mirth and mayhem, and it very much leans into that. The dice mechanics feature a bane and boon system. Or sorry, yeah, banes and boons, and then there's also you can roll dragons and demons. Um, so rolling a dragon is essentially rolling a critical. Rolling a demon is essentially rolling a critical failure. Um, it is a roll over system, if I recall
Oh,
correctly.
that's interesting with it being
Um,
European.
and it
Mhm.
is it was a lot of fun. I ran the game for a couple of conventions. I ran a couple of one shots, and what we found in playing the system is that it's very lethal, right? The system
Mhm.
does not play around damage wise. Are if you are rolling to hit something, you either hit it or you don't. There's really not a whole lot of damage mitigation. There's no chances for an enemy to not get hit. It's literally you hit them or you don't, and when you hit them, you usually do a chunk of damage. Like it's definitely something where if the dice are
Yeah.
against you as a player, you won't last very long.
No.
Um,
I think is that the same system as Symborum or Symborum on a different system?
Symborum is different.
Okay.
Yeah, Symborum. They're both from Free League.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Which is what
Um,
my brain associated.
yeah, yep. They're both Free League systems, but Dragonbane is based specifically on that older
Okay.
Scandinavian system, whereas Symbaroum is their property.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
it's fun.
and Symbaroum is a roll under, I
It
believe, if I
is roll
recall
under.
correctly. Yep. And again, Symbaroum as a system is very dark. It's very dark European. Um, the world that you inhabit in that system is not full of hope. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, I got to play in a short campaign of that, and I got to play basically the ogre character which essentially is a forest spirit that at some point decides to come out of the forest and hang out with people for a while. Um, it was a lot of fun. The system, the one thing I will say about Simbaroom is it felt very swingy.
I remember that.
There
Yeah.
were there were checks where there were sometimes checks that were super easy to hit, and there were sometimes checks that were very difficult to hit, and it didn't seem like there was a it didn't seem like there was a great bell curve to that system, right? It's either you're swinging really high or you're not hitting anything. Like there's not a whole lot of in between there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, that's kind of very similar to, Tales from the Loop kind of has that feeling as well. It's like
Mhm,
that
mhm.
moment, and I've heard, the way Tales from the Loop was described to me was it's very much in the same vein as the book It by Stephen King, where
Yeah,
they're
for
always
sure.
getting beaten down. And then there's that moment when they all are standing on the ledge throwing rocks at the bullies. And that is that one moment where they actually stood up for themselves and did something amazing. And that's where Tales from the Loop had that kind of feeling. So I'm wondering if Symbarium has that kind of,
No,
build.
Symbaroum
Mhm.
very much feels like you are the storyline that you are in is destined to end poorly. It's just
Oh,
how poorly is
oh,
it going to end? Um,
Very grim dark system.
yeah.
it is a very dark system. However, that made for some very interesting gameplay in the groups I was in because
Mhm.
everyone wanted to play light in a dark system. So you've got this whole world that is beating your characters down constantly, and and the group I was in was like, you know what, we're not going to let this tear us down, and I was like,
That's
okay,
I
well,
like that though.
here we go. let's let's see how this plays out. Um, and then the other system I'll mention real briefly is one that I'm very familiar with. It's called Identico. It's an
Mm.
Mhm.
independent system. I think we've featured it on Rook and Rasp before. I know a number of our featured players in Rook and Rasp have participated in streams on their channel once in a while. And it's a cyberpunk system that's D20 based. It's very much it's a very crunchy system. It's a lot. There's a lot of skills. There's a lot. It's all rolling over target numbers for skills, um, and again, it kind of leans into higher is better, even higher is even better. And every little advantage you can give yourself with your statistics, with your skills, and everything else, every little edge you can bump that number up, just ends up helping you, right? I have a character that's like level 6 or 7 in that game, or I had a character that was level 6 or 7, and like there were some skills I had a bonus of like 12 to, um, just from
Mhm.
various pieces of gear and cyberware you can get, and like so many other things that offset, right?
Yeah.
Um, but
Mhm.
it's fun because even though as we talk about these systems, they're all using similar dice, they're all using dice in similar ways. Um, Mechanically, they tend to take pieces of existing D20 systems and modify them or really highlight them, right? Um,
Mhm.
that's one thing I'm really enjoying. And the last one I'll mention, and I'm sure another other people here have a lot of experience with it too, is the Modifius, the 2D20
Oh
systems.
yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
I haven't played an iteration of the 2D20s that I haven't enjoyed yet.
You
Each
know,
one of it's all the same system, but each time that they've brought a different flavor, a different property into it, they use the 2D20 system. Whoever's designing these, they're taking the 2D20 system and saying, okay, here are the facets of this system that work best for this property. Let's really push those. Because to go from playing like 2D20 Conan, which I mean,
yeah.
again, 2D20 Conan is very high adventure. Combat is extremely lethal.
I
It's
really need
very
to
much
play that.
built. Oh my gosh, it's some. If you get a chance, I recommend it. If I could run
Yeah.
it, I would. I would
Yeah.
even think about it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, sad.
I don't think I've ever played a 2D20 system actually.
Oh,
Or if I have, I only did like one time, a long time
you've
ago.
got you've got
But
Conan, you've got Dune, and again, same system.
yeah.
But then when you get to the Dune, it's like they looked at the
Political.
system and they were like, here's how we can use this system to do all the political string pulling and really
Yeah.
dive into the intrigue part that Dune is best at, right?
Mhm.
Um, And then you've got I just recently got to play Fallout for the first time. And
Oh yeah.
again, Fallout feels like Fallout. Like it's for some reason somehow they made the combat feel very swingy. Like it's either I'm missing all the time and then boom, I get a critical hit, and it feels like that same in the game where like I'm missing, and then suddenly I get to watch the bullet streak across the screen and like blow someone up. Like it has that, and with all the junk and the way that they've built around the property and like the feel of the wastelands. Again, it's amazing. And John, I mean, Lord knows you can speak to Star Trek.
Oh yeah. Well, funny you should mention.
So
because,
can I.
Yeah, Sean. Yeah, you both can definitely speak to Star Trek.
But so the 2D20 system, and this ties in a weird way because when we talk about board games and we say Euro style board games, it's about not exactly directly competitive gameplay where you're building up a point system, but the points are usually added up at the end of a game. When you talk about tabletop role-playing games, when you talk about Euro-style tabletop role-playing games, especially in the D20, a lot of times you're talking about the roll lower, where the 1 is a critical and the 20 is a failure. And so Star Trek is a 2D20. Every time you roll within your skill frame, like your skill and your stat frame, you're succeeding per dice once unless you get a critical, and then it's twice. So if you're rolling 2 dice only, you have a chance of anywhere from no successes to 4 successes if you get criticals on both dice. So, and it creates a really interesting feed on that. But yeah, Star Trek is good. They also do have Fallout. Fallout is amazing. It is, in my opinion, the best iteration of 2D20 to come out yet. Now, they also did have Conan. Conan is a license that has lapsed. So if you find the books, and I'm saying this as a collector, if you find the books, you are finding something that is out of print. And if you want to grab it, grab it. The PDFs, I think, have also been pulled now, so you cannot get them on
now I
Drive-Thru
need to find
RPG.
this. My
Yeah.
my dad was a huge Conan lover, and my name Shireen is from Conan.
Nice.
So I always have I've always had a bit of a special place in my heart for that incredible dorkiness. It's so over the top. It's so cheesy. It's so it is exactly
It
what it
is.
says on the tin. It is adventure, and there's no brain involved. You don't
Oh
think.
yeah.
You kill the sorcerers because he hates magic, and you with the sword, and you fight big monsters, and that's it. And you meet
Yeah.
hot women, and like I mean, isn't that the dream?
You
Like
know, I
I'd love to
also
run around with the sword meeting hot women.
yeah. Now, as far as Modifius goes, who are the publishers of the 2D20 system, they also ported Infinity, which is a French battle game originally, and they turned it into a role-playing game. So that's also within the universe. Achtung Cthulhu, which has been all over the map. There was one released by Chaosium because they hold the Call of Cthulhu license. Well, now Achtung Cthulhu is held by the 2D20 license. And I'm trying to think, are there any others I'm missing that are 2D20?
I think we've hit all of the major
Ooh.
Modifius ones.
There's
yeah.
there's one hidden one. There is one hidden one I forgot about. Not many people talk about it. Homeworld. So the
True.
old computer game
Yep.
Homeworld has
Oh,
also been
yeah.
ported to 2D20.
I completely forgot about that.
I haven't seen people really talk about it as much, but it is a system again that Euro style of 1 success, 20 failure.
Homeworld was also like, just to go off topic for a second.
Yeah.
Homeworld was very much a very niche style of game that got really well known for how well it was done. But I grew up in that era, and I don't really know a ton of people that enjoyed and played Homeworld like frequently.
Yeah.
But it was a really neat setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's.
I
Sorry.
I was gonna say that with the Modifius, I mean, if you're So like I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I've got a special place in my heart. But the way they laid out those books, I mean, it's like reading a Starfleet manual. Not dry and technical. It's just the way it's like, yep, this is Star Trek. This is awesome. And like the Fallout book is the same way. It's like, yeah, I could see me finding this in the wasteland and picking it up and learning a new skill. I mean, the books are gorgeous, and it's a testament to knowing the property that makes these games so successful for them. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of it. I mean, the system is great and it moves really well, but I've played Fallout, I've played Star Trek, I've read through the Dune book, and even though they share the same system, they are like three completely different games.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
just amazing.
yep. Well, pulling in and moving on, also in this same vein of the Euro style, I'm going to pull in one that not too many people talk about, and that is the Dark Eye.
That
So,
is pretty.
yeah, the Dark Eye is from Ulysses Spiel. So this is a German company that brought this over and ported it. It had been ported for D&D Third Edition in about 2000. And so it's an interesting game. They came to Gen Con a few years ago, and the way they sold the game was, hey, you're playing this you're playing in a world that is based on folklore of different countries that are not where you're from. Why not play the game that is from the country with the folklore? Why not if you want to play a game that has German folklore, why not play a game by Germans? It works in a way. I mean, that is logical. But I will say this.
Yeah,
This is
and you would expect, I think, there to be a lot less issues with like the cultural appropriation and the, mishandling or misunderstanding of folklore. If you're talking about your own country's
yeah.
folklore, you would kind of hope at least that they would be representing it with a lot more respect and
Yeah.
fact. Like it wasn't just some writer making stuff up.
Yeah.
That it's based on like real. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like. I mean, I'm a nerd. I like to research things, and I like it when sometimes it's fun if something is based on like real folklore, because then you can go and research that and give you other ideas for plot hooks and
Yep.
whatnot.
And well, with the Dark Eye, now this is a system of roll lower, which actually kind of came out of Tunnels and Trolls in the 80s, which was a European game. And the idea again, one was a critical, 20 was a failure. It was a harder game because they made it like it was a 1 through a 4 was like your area of success. So it was a much harder game. But Dark Eye has this they call upon you to use three different skills or stats. You're going to roll three different colored or three different D20s to succeed on a skill because their argument is every skill is not just one thing. It is not just dexterity. It is not just strength. It is not just constitution. When you are climbing a rope over a chasm, you are using your strength, you're using your dexterity, you're using your constitution. So you're rolling all three of those dice, and you need to succeed on all three of those dice in order to succeed on the skill check. If you fail on one of those dice, you know the way in which you have failed. Could you not hold on? Were you not strong enough? Did you put your hand? So it's an interesting concept in that way.
It's funny that you mentioned that system because we were talking about it in our side chat here, and it came up, and it wasn't in our original rundown, but Mork Borg is a
Mm-hmm.
system that's a D20 and use. It's very similar in that way. Mork Borg is, it's another Scandinavian system, right? Um, and they go with four skills, and anything you could possibly ever do goes into those four skills. And if and again, it's a roll under system if I remember right. I did a brief review on it for a different show, and it's again extremely brutal. Like the system in and of itself is there is a high likelihood that your character is going to die. Like that's just the brutality of the system. It's all built around random tables too. Like it very much harkens back to early editions of other systems. Yeah. Where if you want to run this for somebody, there's literally an entire section on the back of the book that's like, here's your random dungeon, here's your random enemies, here's like roll percentage dice to get these random things so you can make an adventure right off the bat, and here's the reason you're adventuring, and go, and here's all the things that are going to kill you.
And I did not know that Mark Borg was D20. I recently grabbed the books for Pirate Borg.
Yeah, Pirate Borg is awesome. But again, it's all that same. It's like, again, it's a very heavy metal, death metal versions of genre games, right? Because I know that somebody's working on like Cowboy Borg.
Yep.
Like
Duck Borg.
Duck Borg is it's amazing. There's a lot of variants for that system. And then the other one that was mentioned by somebody in our chat, by Rilche86, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, was Shadow of the Demon Lord, which is also, it's a well-known inside of its own genre. It's a well-known D20, like dark horror, like leans heavy into the gore and gruesomeness of the setting that it's in. Everything will kill you.
Mm-hmm. Is that the book? Was there an older version of Mork Borg? Or am I thinking of something else?
No, it's a fairly new game. It has an old look to it. It has almost a zine look to it.
It's like heavy metal.
Yeah, but I remember there being a game that I played a long time ago, like in the 90s, and it had weird descriptions for your abilities. And the only one I remember for some reason was able to put sharp things through soft things that scream and bleed. That was the name of your power.
That was
the name of your power. And the whole
oh my gosh
thing was done in like ink. It was like handwritten. It was like all hand drawn, and it was like doodled, and there was like little, and it was kind of trippy, but it was also kind of metal, and it was kind of and I can't remember.
I'm loving your face, man. I'm loving your face, Michael.
you remember it too, right? You remember what I'm talking about. It's like right on the tip of your brain, right?
I am having a memory of a system that has been referenced a number of times in conversations in the last few years about being one of the like most disgusting systems ever put out.
It was a weird.
It was game. D20, but I'm trying to remember the name of it now, and it is just escaping.
It's like disgusting, as in even the writing in it was really inappropriate.
Yeah.
Okay, then
exactly.
I think I know which one you're talking about. I'm not certain I want to say it out loud.
No. Just to know that I think we're all talking about the same system. It was pretty bad.
I think you are talking about. Should I say it?
Not that one, Corey.
From a long time ago.
It's called Fatal.
Fatal. Yeah, I think it's Fatal.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. I think that was it.
Nobody talks about Fatal.
So long ago.
I don't think nobody talks about Fatal for good reason.
It was so long ago. I just remembered like thinking that those D20 doesn't make a good system. It just makes a system.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about, like you were saying, when someone really dedicates themselves to turning the system, to tweaking the system to suit the vibe and the atmosphere and everything that you're going for, it works super well. But if you just have a bad idea, system is going to fix that, right?
To say again that D20, right, is like all of these systems we're talking about use D20, but it's not all like variations on the same thing, right? Like
Yep.
Mhm.
D20 as the primary die that you use, but you may not be looking at the same thing, right? So
Yeah.
anybody can build a system around a D20 and to build on your point, Shireen. Yeah, not every D20 system that's built is good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
honestly, D20 is just a
Yeah,
random number generator after all.
it
Yeah.
really is. But I think sometimes that's also a little bit intimidating for people. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why people are afraid to step out of um of D&D. Because especially like that's what you've been introduced to, or you get used to it and you know how that works, and you're like, okay, but what if I go to all the trouble of learning a new system and I hate it? And or like it's
Yeah.
either it like just not a good system objectively, like it
And
was not well balanced or put together, or it's just not how my brain works. I don't like it. I don't think that way. I think a lot of people are afraid of that, but like as most of us grew up, when we got into gaming, we got exposed to many different types of games.
yes.
We were able to go, yeah, okay, this one has some good like a handful of funny elements to it, but as a system, toss.
Yeah.
And you remember those, but the things you pull that handful of things out of it, right? Like when the Tank Girl movie came out in '95, there was also a role playing system that came out, and I never got a chance to play it. I still need a copy of this book.
God, I did
Give
not
that to me
know
for
that
my
there was a
birthday.
Tank Girl RPG.
There's a
No,
Tank Girl
I need it.
RPG.
I need it in my life.
It's hilarious. The system apparently, from what I've read on the reviews, I never actually got a chance to like buy the book, even though I was like obsessed with Tank Girl at the time. It had an element that I think was hilarious. You actually had to take one of your skills was a useless skill, and so it has like, things like you can drink orange juice after brushing your teeth, or you can crush a beer can onto your head. Or one of them is you can disarm a nuclear weapon, and I was like, "How is that a useless skill?" And then I'm like, "Well, wait, how often are you going to get to the opportunity
Yeah.
to disarm a nuclear weapon, right?" So, I just thought that was a fun. Like a lot of people have said, the system itself was like the world and the atmosphere and everything was great, and there's tons of world building and everything, but the system itself was like not great.
Well,
But I like
The
that.
Tank Girl system was West End Games, The World of Tank Girl.
Yes.
oh, I will have to track it down. West End Games.
I
Well-
just did a little. Let me Google that for you.
Oh,
But I think that game, like games like that, and games like that other the one we don't talk about, taught me that sometimes you can read through a book and maybe take one or two pieces out of it and go, okay, you know what, I like this concept and I like this concept, but everything else is no good, and that's fine. I think also, as much as people are afraid to step out of their comfort zone, I think it's important to learn what you don't like and why you don't like it.
oh yeah. Now,
I think that's really, really important. I really struggle with math, and I struggle more with math when I'm put on the spot. If someone's waiting for me or they're asking me, like I'm, being directly like, hey, if someone just walks up to me and goes like, "What's 5 times 7?" I'll be like my brain just shuts down. I can't think, and so having to do a lot of math on a page is always going to turn me off personally, right? I know that about myself because I've played enough games to know that if it's a really math heavy system, I'm gonna stall out when it comes to those, right?
yeah.
I'm gonna stall out. And I know that about myself, but I also know that I really, really like narrative focused games or role play heavy games.
Yeah.
I know that's what I like because I've gotten a chance to, and I've gotten to play games that I didn't like very much. I think you kind of have to accept that sometimes you're going to play a game and you're just not really going to like it.
But
And that's okay because it's just as educational as finding out what you do like.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
100%.
I've got 3 more games that I want to throw y'all's way. So, and I've got one that, because we're talking about system. We've talked about rolling under, we've talked about rolling over. And I've got one that kind of breaks the mold that I will bring your way now. And that is Polaris. So, Polaris is from Black Library, which is in Southern Europe. And I I thought for a long time I would never find another game that does what it does. And what it challenges you with is you're not trying to roll over or under. You are trying to get as close to the target number as possible. So if your target number is a 10, the closer you are to it, the better variable of your success. So if you roll like a 9, you've got like you've got an extreme success. You roll down to a 6, you've got just a minimal success. So it kind of puts you in this range to know how well you did on a test. And I hadn't thought I'd never find another game that did that.
Is that the one that we played on stream, John?
Yes, it is. Yes,
That
actually,
was fun. That was a lot of fun. Trying to hit that target number. It was exciting to try to swing for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
I'll put this up so you can get a feel for the world. So it takes place in a post-apocalyptic kind of setting where the world's polar ice caps have melted, and the our atmosphere is gone. So you cannot. Not only is it gone, but the surface is said to be toxic after a battle with aliens. So all life, mankind has moved underwater. And so the entire game takes place in these, structures, underwater structures, submarines, countries that live and exist entirely underwater. And the reason the name Polaris is the name of the game is the Polaris Force, which is a force of magic or power that has been awakened in the world thanks to some aliens that came and helped us out. They basically gave us the Polaris ability to fight back against the aliens. We basically gained psychic powers to reach across this void and do all kinds of amazing things. Downside to it is if you have Polaris powers, you have a shortened lifespan. But altogether, amazing game, well written, has a little bit of a cyberpunk feel. There's only one edition of the game in English. They've continued on, which breaks my heart. They put out 2 editions after this one overseas.
Conceptually, I don't know if anybody remembers watching it, the Sequest show, when the later seasons where they went to the future and it was more kind of grim dark Sequest. That's Polaris, but way cooler. Polaris way cooler than what we had that final season of Sequest.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, now another one that I'm going to toss out has recently come back into print. And I am loving it. I have gotten to play with the line editor of the game twice now, the current line editor, and that is Pendragon. Pendragon is from Chaosium, and you play as knights of the realm from different areas and different countries. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of historical research into it to try and merge both the fantasy of King Arthur. Whoa. With the sorry, lights went out there a second. But to merge the fantasy of that world with the real world. So they talk about being knights from Ireland in that time period in Scotland as well coming down. And it is a lot of fun. It is super lethal. My first time to play it, I went through 4 characters in one session. I had a blast. I do want to say that. I had an absolute blast because I went into combat with a sword versus a mythical giant boar for my lady love. And it killed me 4 times. But the thing is, I had a blast. And I went into the game kind of knowing that that's kind of the feel. But seriously, Pendragon, amazing game. The goal is it is a roll below your target number, but hitting the number is a critical success. So it kind of it feels a little bit like Polaris. These are the only two games I know that they want you to roll the target number. Rolling a 20 is a failure. Now, I love this. So they have something in this game called passions. And your passions adjust your ability and adjust your failure number. It's really crazy. So all of a sudden, maybe you are passionate or about about your kingdom, about your family, or about your religion, or about whatever. Maybe you are passionate about the concept of courtly love. And if you can
Courtney Love.
So if you can figure out a way to include a song from Hole in your role, no. If you can figure out a way to include your passion into your role, you can gain a bonus. Not only that, but you can also shift your failure. So all of a sudden, if you roll a 20, it doesn't matter that you failed because now it's a 24 or whatever else. I love that idea, and it's a great, great game. I have one more. Does anybody have one more that they want to toss out before I get there? Y'all might already have this one, but anybody?
Yeah, go for it. What is it? Share.
Okay. So I'm gonna bring us back across the oceans, back to the U.S. And
Riffs.
yeah, we had to pull it out. I'm sorry, folks. We had to pull out
yeah.
the Palladium systems.
I've played that a long time ago. Yeah,
Oh, boy.
Rifts.
So-
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I had my Palladium stuff ready to go, but Rifts covers it all.
That's the game I played. It was Palladium Heroes. Palladium
Yeah.
Heroes. I used to play that one. I could only remember that it was a superhero game, and that name just did not narrow it down. I remember playing that, and a buddy of mine in that game had himself a super suit. He was inside like a big mecha, and every time he was a scientist, and of course every time he had to do something, it was for science. And
Yeah.
like that was his, rallying cry.
What's funny is there's like only a quarter inch of the book that's for rules. The rest of it is characters, weapons,
Powers, yeah.
powers. Yeah, it's just.
I remember really liking that because the other person in the group, created a character that was the spirit of Winnipeg, which is where we live, and so she could like summon floods and mosquitoes, and stuff like that. But the running gag, if you live in Winnipeg, there are 2 degrees of separation between you and anyone in Winnipeg. It's so different from any other city. Somehow, you have a connection in like 2 steps with any other person. So this character's power would be like, anytime we walked up to somebody, they'd be like, "Wait a minute, didn't my brother go to school with your brother?" And she'd be like, "Yeah." And then it was like, and I really liked how that system,
Sorry, I
much
had to
like
rescue a
papers,
dog.
but much like it really allowed you to have a lot of fun with the powers.
Yep.
The rules in terms of the powers were not super strict. They were pretty sort of generalized. So yeah, it was really easy to customize your powers and come up with some really clever, really original, really interesting superheroes where you weren't playing like Superman and Wonder Woman and Spider-Man every time. A lot of those superhero games have very, very narrow powers and
Yeah,
because I really liked that one.
Yeah.
I started playing this game when I was 12, so I pretty much trying to recreate Spider-Man, Batman,
Wolverine.
Wolverine, right?
Wrong with that? That's great.
Yeah.
But
But Rifts is big.
well, Rifts, and I'm going to say the Palladium system in general because all Palladium games use the same system. The entire idea is that you can plug and play. Rifts is a kitchen sink. Everything that ever existed can be found in it. You want vampires, you want knights in shining armor, you want giant mecha, you want you name it. It exists in the Rift universe. But Palladium kind of does that as well, and they have other games. I think Palladium, as far as I'm concerned, is a little bit back on the map because of how big the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Kickstarter went. And so now Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is back out there as a role-playing game, which we have all been begging
Nice.
for.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been begging for it. We've been like, hey,
That was
there's a board game.
yeah. Well, back when we were kids, I think when most of us were kids, role-playing games weren't like elementary school kids. Role-playing games weren't sort of well known, unless you had like parents or older siblings that played.
Yeah.
There wasn't like sort of general talk. There wasn't a show on TV that played, Dungeons and Dragons. And so, but at the same time, a lot of things that we used to do as kids count as role playing.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
my friend and I we were obsessed with Ninja Turtles back when it came out. And we used to sit on the phone and have these sort of combination like fan fiction role playing type sessions,
Yeah.
where we were friends with the turtles and we were also ninjas because we wanted to be ninjas. Obviously, that was the most important part. Because who wouldn't want to be a ninja? And we always had to fight over who got to date Casey Jones and but
Fair.
Goon Gala all the way.
it's in the way that like 12-year-olds, you hold hands or whatever, right? Like,
That's so fair.
yeah. But it was really fun when I did get into like more structured role playing to realize, oh, I've already kind of been doing this, just no structure, like a sort of free form thing. I used to do that. We used to play. We used to make up all kinds of stories on the playground and kind of role play and stuff. And so it was like, to me, it just felt like formalizing what you used to do
Yeah.
on the playground as a kid. And so I guess in that way, I've never been able to. It's not that I can't play a serious game, but I've never taken any particular system like to heart and like made it my personality and been personally offended if somebody didn't like it or whatever like that, because
Yeah.
Play
it's
too many
still, it's
games.
still hanging out on the playground with your friends to me,
That's
and I just don't see the reason to be a dick about it.
Yeah.
exactly.
But yeah. Well, with Palladium and their D20 system, what they did, I like. So, if you're dealing with AC, in Dungeons and Dragons and in Palladium, 10 is kind of that median. Like if you're figuring out your armor, you're starting at 10, adding stuff up, trying to figure out what you can hit. Palladium sets it at 5. So if you can somehow roll higher than 5, you're going to hit. Now, they changed that a little bit by adding different ways of having armor. And your armor automatically changes your AC. It changes it from like a 5 to a 10 or a 5 to a 12, which is kind of a cool way of doing it. So, but Palladium, so all these systems we've done, D20 is the critical. We've done 1 is the critical. We've seen games that have, you're trying to roll the target number. In Palladium, all rolls are versus. So if you roll a d20 to hit, they're rolling a d20 to dodge, and you are comparing those numbers. So Palladium shifts it that way, and on top of that, most combat rolls, like I said, are versus, but that AC, if they cannot dodge, you're trying to hit a 5. So I think that's a really cool idea. They handle skills differently. All Palladium skills are done with percentile, kind of like Chaosium. All Chaosium skill checks, all Chaosium checks, period, are percentile dice. So is Palladium. So it's an interesting way that there's that little touch of complexity, but. Oh, now the thing is, can I love you, Palladium. Can I honestly hand this book to somebody and tell them this is the game you need to play? I love Palladium. I do. But it's also going to be the hardest sell to get a new gamer into, in my opinion,
Unless it's turtles.
unless it's Turtles.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with just the fact that there are so many people when we talk about the elephant in the room, right, being D&D. There are certainly a fair number of people out there who are like, I know this system, and when I decide I want to play a game, I don't want to spend all the small window of free time I have learning something new when this suits my purposes, right? Like I think there's a lot of people that are like that, where when you only have that couple hours a week to play with a group of friends, perhaps D&D is just the easy answer because almost everybody knows how to play it.
Not only that, you can take D&D and then play another system licensed by D&D, but the rule set's going to be the same. Again, that's an easier transition to play into. You don't have to learn anything new. Yeah, no, I mean, granted, we're kind of the oddballs in the room because I find a new game book and I'm like, I want to read it. I want to learn the rules.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah,
let's see how
I'm
this works.
excited. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I think I think this is a good point to kind of go out on is, here's your chance.
games.
There are tons of games out there that are D20. There are tons of things to experience, and there's more than just the flavor of D&D. There's more than just Pathfinder, and this is just a small portion of the community. Like we've stuck to one dice, and look how much we've talked about. Uh, and my goal is we're going to start talking about more and more systems or more and more games out there that use similar mechanics. Games that use D6s, games that use D10s, games that use dice pools, games that use cards, games that are diceless. And I kind of want to do this before we start hitting individual properties. We're going to talk about the way these games are because when Tome Travelers first started in 2016, it was more like a shotgun. I was like, here's a game I like. 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 And I was like,
Ain't nothing wrong with that either.
yeah. So
Nope.
we're going to be hitting all these different ways that games are out there. And then we'll start hitting individual properties and we'll start talking about all the different parts and pieces of it. Does anybody have any other points they want to go out on? Anything else they want to toss out?
I mean, kind of segging into your point and kind of bringing it back to the beginning of this episode. The good thing about D&D and a lot of these other systems being in existence is that today we have far more role-playing games than we've ever had in circulation before.
Oh, heck yeah.
Because not only are people going, okay, I want to play D&D because it's so saturated in like media representation, you also have these other people that are going, okay, D&D is fun. I want to see what else is out there. Oh, what else is out there doesn't suit what I feel like I want from a role-playing game. Let me write my own. And
Yeah.
that, I think, is also
Yeah,
fucking amazing. I love that
There's-
aspect of being a gamer today.
yeah, I love it
We have to
too.
give-
and, like,
Credit to the original systems, like D&D back way when, and some of the others that were around before I was even born. I'm a baby.
no, for sure. And like, I don't have a problem with people like if D&D is your first game, fine,
Yeah.
great. I don't care. I want people into the system, and especially as someone, I as a woman and I as a queer woman, there was not a lot of representation. That was a huge pull toward the vampire game for me, because there was queer representation in that. It wasn't great, but it was there. It existed, and that was like the first game that acknowledged that existed. Like
Vampire,
you could do that,
yeah, Vampire was the first representation that existed. Period. As far there may be something that I'm missing because
Yeah.
the bigger systems I'm actually not as familiar with as I probably should be, like their histories.
Yeah.
But it was representation at a time where it really mattered, and that could probably
Really
be its
did matter.
own episode before we
Yeah,
get too
but
deep
like,
into it.
what a breath of fresh air that was,
Mhm.
for someone who loved storytelling. And then, and so like to me, like that's my motivation to other people. I tell them, you know what, I started out playing D&D, I started out playing AD&D, and and I played 3.5 and I played 4th edition, and I had fun. But when I found Vampire, it was like opening my eyes for the first time. It opened this whole door of storytelling to me, and this whole completely different way of playing, and that's just wonderful. And then when I played Capers and I played with the playing card system, that just opened up a whole other world to me of like ways of gaming that I've never played. I've yet to try one of the Jenga games. I'm gonna try one of those.
Ooh,
The
yeah,
Jenga ones are
Dread.
fun.
Yeah,
I gotta
Dread
play one of the
is.
Jenga games, but but I really love like in Capers just how like versatile it is, and you have so much more control over the night winning and losing. And then I also LARPed, which was like incredible for reducing the mechanics of something just down to nothing. It's a let's play. I got so good at rock paper scissors, and and I was in a vamp LARP for over 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, our LARP, much like many others, was investigated by the police for the gang activity. We were not the only ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so it was not uncommon actually, and the fact that we two of our people owned the D Machine, which was the goth bar in Osborne Village. So we used to hang out in Osborne Village, which was a fairly public place, and we'd be doing so. I can still remember something like this was out of character. Like this, or I think it was this, meant that you were speaking a different language. If you like held your
Yep.
fingers on your chin, it meant you're speaking a different language. We had all these like different hand signals, and so we're dressed like a bunch of weirdos, and we're using hand signals. So like, of course, the cops show up.
Yep.
And then so eventually, like they sort of figured out what was going on, and they went to talk to the storytellers. And there was a handful of people running the game, and the people running the game were like, "God no, like you got nothing to worry about. Like don't worry, come and sit in a game for a while." And they were like, "Okay," and they were there for like 15 minutes, and they were like, "Oh my God, these people are nerds. We're out of here." And
Short segue on that. When I played in the LARP for Vamp, really quick, we played at Sam Houston State University, which is in Texas, and it's got two primary purposes of this university. Is either you're going there to become a teacher, or you're going there for law enforcement. And the amount of cops and prison guards that I played with, and if you know anything about me, you can imagine how interesting some of the looks were. But yeah. But anyway, I think this is a great note to go out on for tonight. Right now, we're doing our shows once a month until we get to a point where I think we can start piping them out. We do have a YouTube channel where we keep most of our actual plays, and we also have a specifically YouTube channel for our podcast. So it's Rook and Rasp Podcasts on YouTube. And if you want to see our first episode where we talked about, kind of just really got to know each other and talked about the games that are the core experiences of RPGs, that one is there. So other than that, my name's John Thompson here at Rook and Rasp, and I'll let everybody kind of go ahead and say goodnight for the evening.
Good night, folks.
All right.
Join us next month.
We'll see y'all.
Come out to the Discord.
Yep.
Come out to the Discord.
Yes.
Well, I'll go ahead and drop the information on the Discord and everything in our chat, so we hope to see y'all there.
Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.